Hello, and welcome to the Argyle CFO Leadership Forum. My name is Nick with Argyle, and it's great to have everyone joining us today. A couple of notes before I turn things over to our panel moderator. To ask questions throughout the session, simply type into the Q&A chat, and we will address your questions at the end of the session. Now, without further delay, I would like to introduce our moderator, Philip Peck, Vice President, Advisory Services and Finance Transformation Practice, Peloton Group. We are super excited to have Philip and our panelists for a panel discussion titled Intertwining Agility and Flexibility into FP&A. Welcome, Philip. Over to you.
Nick, thanks so much. I'm extremely excited to be moderating this session as the topic is highly relevant for the FP&A community, and we have two outstanding FP&A leaders sharing their insights and wisdom throughout the panel discussion. Before we get started, I'd like to share a little bit about my background and then allow our panelists to do the same. I'm currently the Vice President of Advisory Services and Finance Transformation for Peloton Consulting Group. Our company helps companies drive digital transformation across their enterprise, providing advisory, consulting, and managed services capabilities across enterprise performance management, enterprise resource management, supply chain management, human capital management, customer experience, analytics, and data management for the cloud. I've personally spent my entire career, 35 plus years in the FP&A and finance domain area, working in various corporate roles as well as management consulting roles, helping organizations explore the art of the possible and adopt leading edge practices across the entire FP&A function. I now would like each of the panelists to introduce themselves. Shweta, would you like to go first?
Sure. Thanks, Philip, and very excited to be here. Like you said, this is a great topic, and I'm happy to share thoughts and hear more from you and Matt. So my name is Shweta Pai for everybody on the forum. I'm a CFO at a company called Book and Street. We are a fractional CFO company that works with early stage, typically venture-backed or private equity-backed companies. And we provide all kinds of financial back office functions, CFO services, strategic planning, modeling, fundraising assistance, as well as we work a lot with kind of other back office functions as well, such as equity comp and equity stock compensation, or we work with a lot of startups around things like payroll and other back office functions when they're too small to really have an HR function, so it kind of just rolls up under us. So I work with a lot of small startups, typically tech-based startups. I came from, I had my own startup, so that's where I kind of have some background in that. But prior to having my own data analytics startup, I did have, I was all over in corporate FP&A. I used to lead corporate FP&A for a $11 billion healthcare company. Prior to that, I worked in investment banks, as well as I've gone across a lot of industries, doing typically leading FP&A teams, either at a business level, business unit level, or at a corporate level. I've also straddled into corporate development, M&A, strategy, all of those kind of functions as well. So I have a wide finance background, and then also, because of my startup now, data analytics background. So it's interesting to now be kind of on CFOs for data analytics and apply that for startups. So it's been an exciting journey and happy to share. I'll turn it over to Matt.
Yeah, Shweta, thank you. And fantastic background, a lot of diverse set of experiences I'm sure you'll be sharing with the audience here today. Matt, your turn.
Sure. Hi, I'm Matt McFadden. I've spent over 15 years now in my career in corporate finance. So mostly in the FP&A space, but as I'm sure Shweta will know, we're kind of a Swiss Army knife. So just limiting us to FP&A is maybe a bit of a misnomer. Like Shweta, worked in both corporate and I would say divisional settings across food manufacturing, banking, tech, really telecom manufacturing, and now telecom construction. So I've kind of seen a bit of everything from blue collar to white collar P&Ls, if you will. I've done budgeting, forecasting on the expense side exclusively, on the revenue side exclusively, from a holistic perspective and a consolidation perspective. I've done special projects, a little bit of involvement in M&A, mostly from the analytics standpoint and data gathering. And I have a pretty strong background at this point in, I would say, business intelligence and business partnership. I'm currently at a company called Congruex, which is a privately held telecom construction company. So quite literally digging the ditches and stringing the cable and splicing fiber for really 12, well, it's a company of 12 sub companies across the US. And it has been quite the education over the past, I would say, 4.5 months into this world. So like Shweta, I'm excited to kind of have this discussion again and be back talking about agility, which I'm living and breathing wholeheartedly right now.
Awesome. I'm looking forward to hearing both of your experiences. And Matt, I know we had our prep call, and sounds like you dove right into the proverbial foxhole, and you're leveraging all your experiences to help the organization. So let's start with our first question. And Shweta, I'm going to go with you first, and then have Matt respond as well. From your experience, what are the biggest obstacles finance teams have had to overcome, and what impact have these had on the FP&A function? To the extent you have some real world examples, that'd be great to share with the audience here.
Yeah. So when I think of FP&A, or, I feel like what a lot of people equate FP&A and in general, oftentimes finance with is the dreaded budget cycle. So I think a long, arduous, detailed budget cycle that takes a long time to build out, but then almost immediately after it's done is it becomes redundant or it's out of date, is probably one of the biggest challenges that I've had to face across a lot of companies. And honestly, that is probably the one thing that has a huge impact on FP&A as a function. It has kind of not only just how we interact with the businesses, but also it's the view of finance kind of changes if your budget cycle is very long and kind of seen as like unnecessary or seen as being just not really a value add. It kind of translates into, well, what are you doing with my time? Why are you wasting time? And it sets the whole relationship with the business off on the wrong step. So to me, that's the biggest challenge. I mean, I've gone through so many different companies now, and I've seen they've run the gamut around, how long the cycle is to how detailed it is. I will say the one that was the most effective was, and this is why it's so important for agility, for organizations to be agile, it was an organization that really took agility to heart and built the budget. The budget cycle was very short. Their entire finance cycle was short. Month end took 8 hours for them, and they were a multi-billion-dollar global business, but everybody closed their books in 8 hours time, and on work day one. So they kind of applied that same thought process to budget, and that made so budget cycles were very short and really dovetailed right into your forecasts, which were also short and done right away. And forecast cycles, budget cycle took 6 weeks, if that. there 6 weeks was like with taking into account all the reporting and all that stuff that goes into it. But the forecast cycle was literally a week long, which is amazing. Again, this was a multi-billion-dollar global business, took agility to heart. But what it did is it helped the entire organization make better financial decisions, which then helped elevate the finance function to be seen as much more strategic. This was an organization that helped me straddle from FP&A into strategy because it just made sense. We were right there. We were not just keeping score, we were actually helping people make plays. So that was, I think that, once you solve that one issue, it just has such a huge domino effect. So to me, that's always going to be, hey, build a process that cycle times are short, don't have long budget or forecast cycles.
Those are great, great insights. I'm remembering an article I once read decades ago, where even today, the world hasn't radically changed. In some instances, like the global organization, multi-billion-dollar you referenced, they cracked the nut, they're in the top quartile. But I remember the article being the black hole of budgeting. It just
Yes.
sucks everything in like a vortex, or an old Star Trek episode from the 60s that's a black hole. Another one is a client I had worked with where a gentleman came in to basically revamp the FP&A function, but they didn't call it that. They call it the budget team. And they lived on a different floor. It was as if they were behind these gated walls and people are like, ooh, don't touch them. Like they ooze of toxic waste or something. But it took them, 18 to 24 months even to get people thinking differently. I think what you honed in on was get to the answer as quickly as you can, such that you can help the organization course correct, make changes, run scenarios, and add the value that you want FP&A and finance to bring.
Yeah, absolutely.
Matt, how about you?
Sure. Well, I think Shweta hit on a very, very big one as FP&A being seen as sort of only this budgeting function. So I think she had a great track on that one. I'll put that to the side for mine. I think three things that I think of in terms of challenging for a finance function. One is kind of breaking that conception that we're all just accountants and we're all backward looking, or we're all only here to keep track of the books. Is one. I think being seen and learning to become trusted, or earning our way into being trusted as a business intelligence and business partner across the company. And then kind of a third one is to help kind of drive the importance of storytelling across an organization. And so one of the aspects in terms of breaking the accounting mold is to say that we're not bean counters, we are problem solvers. And so what we are really good at, and on top of the fast processes Shweta brought up, and I will completely support the ability to help companies move faster, is the ability to sort of break apart the P&L into a story that can be related to somebody who doesn't speak numbers. So people in sales and marketing and a lot of the executive team that don't speak in basis points and margin and things of that nature. So one of the areas that I've focused a lot of time on in my career of the last 5 to 7 years is data hygiene. Becoming almost kind of rabid about data hygiene, because that is one, an issue I've seen, poorly done, I think is a fair statement at a lot of companies. Not for lack of desire, but just nobody was pushing that direction. But the cleaner the data is and the more rigorous the data hygiene process is, the faster we are able to spin that data into meaningful stories. And once you spin the data into meaningful stories, then you can go to the business partners and help them understand what's going on in their business at a different level. Instead of just showing them, the other maybe trope of FP&A of being the bearer of bad news all the time, instead of kind of just showing them, here's a variance and here's a numerical answer, we can craft a story around this is what happened and this is why it happened and this is what it means going forward, which dovetails back into our forecast process and the budgeting process, et cetera. But to me, I think that the challenges only help to provide opportunities for finance to really put its foot in through the door and drive home how much value we create across the company.
Matt, you clearly highlighted some foundational elements for FP&A and finance, the hygiene and the health and hygiene associated with data accessibility, data quality, data standardization, data ownership, all of those elements. When you think about, broadly speaking, enterprise data management, master data management, I think one cannot stress enough the importance of getting that right, because it all flows downstream from there. To your point, that's the foundation of being able to do analysis, provide insights, make better decisions, and kind of move on from there. Let's go on to the next question. And Matt, I'll start with you on this one. What are best practices for FP&A teams to successfully manage all types of risk?
So I wrote down another 3 things. So one is I wrote model. So never stop modeling, never stop building new views of your own world. A lot of times we can sort of create or join a company that has fallen into a standard set of reporting. And that's the way we look at the company. And I would say, yes, learn that, but also kind of ignore that and continue to build different views of the way the data comes together. In my experience, that's been how I've found discrepancies or oddities or one-off items that once you unlock that information can help drive a better decision-making process. The second one is just understand the external world and how it applies to your company. So whether it's a Wall Street Journal subscription or Forbes or Bloomberg, or whatever other external source you have, there's a lot of information that you can get your hands on. And even if it's not directly applicable to your company, it can be directionally applicable to your company. If you see that there's a rail shutdown and you're in a company that uses rail for transport, you can at least provide the heads up to people across the organization. And the last one in terms of risk, and I have a recent example of this, having gone through a lengthy contract review on a project, is partner with subject matter experts who live in the risk world, especially our friends in legal and operations, who we're good at assessing financial risk, but we may not be good at assessing operational or legal risk that turns into financial risk. And so, just ask the questions, I would say.
I think those are 3 excellent pillars in thinking about how to navigate and manage risk. As you were talking about model, that mantra of the known, the known unknown, and then the unknown, and then the things that they're not even unknown because we could never have predicted them. Pick on something like COVID, where that's modeling, and continuing to modeling. I think the other element, that last point you made, Matt, the partnering with subject matter experts, most organizations have some people, the Jedi Knights, the people with the secret decoder ring, they exist somewhere. And a lot of their insights and knowledge often lives inside their minds. Tapping into those resources, getting it out, codifying it, building it into our models, that's another critical role that we as FP&A practitioners play.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Swetha, yourself on this one.
It's you got some really good ones. The only one I would probably add to that is around automation. Whether we like it or not, automation, AI, all of those analytical tools are coming. And in fact, they can be really good tools. What I've seen is that's automation and really getting a process in place that can help you. It's not just about putting controls, but having some kind of a disciplined process in place can help manage and put your risk down. And that then goes and flows into that automation, where if you put together a process that is somewhat kind of codified in some way within the organization, you can then take that and automate it using whatever analytical tool you want. I think that is probably, using automation and not being fearful of the automation. But then, of course, if before automation, you have to have a good process in place. So that would be my one big thing. And that's what we try to put in with, a lot of our clients come into us. They've just been homegrown companies, they have no process in place, nothing in place as far as financial rigor. And then we come in and we really put a process together, and then B, we figure out how do we automate a lot of their processes so that we can really get at the information easily. We can get at all the, and then, of course, like everything kind of flows from that for us.
Yeah, these are great points. I imagine as helping those organizations, and probably many of them that you work with are relatively immature, and they haven't evolved like the global organization that you mentioned. That's definitely a journey. And you start with the things that you see kind of in front of you, that high impact, relatively lower level of effort, but always being mindful of the roadmap of the broader journey to deliver the value, navigate all the different types of risk that Matt clearly highlighted, and
Exactly.
let FP&A be that indispensable business partner.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, sometimes we also get companies that are going the other way, right? That were bought out by private equity, and now they're split out into different smaller units. And now they're all now learning, oh, well, we used to be part of this parent. Oh, shoot. Now we have to operate as standalone companies. What do we do again? So in those cases, we have to, again, do that same journey. But yeah, it's just an evolution, and there's so many different processes that you forget you need, but that is often the building blocks.
And your last point just triggered a connection back to what Matt had highlighted earlier, the essence of problem solving. And like you just described, in that situation, you spun out, and now you're like, it's a different problem. It's a different game you're now playing. And you have to go into your bag of tricks as an FP&A practitioner and go, what can I use this time? The quiver, the things, the tools. I can't use a hammer this time. I need whatever it is, a conduit vendor to figure that out.
Exactly.
Okay, so this next question, and Swetha, I'm going to start with you. This is like thinking of a little bit of the here and now, but leaning into the future. What opportunities or challenges lie ahead for FP&A professionals for the balance of this year? And I'll extend that and beyond.
I would go back to a lot of, what AI is, it came out in December, right? ChatGPT came out in December, and it seems like it has changed so many different aspects of the analytical world as far as data analytics, and also how it can be applied to different things. I think that is probably one of the biggest things that, if I was, that I'm looking for, that I'm seeing so many tools and analytical kind of machines that are being built, and engines that are being built to take data and really make sense of it in a way that we never had before. Does that mean that, so I think one of the big things is to prepare for, and people have been talking about it I've heard about, robotic process automation, RPA, for better part of a decade now, right? But it always seemed really far away. And I think now with ChatGPT and other generative AI, people are realizing, oh shoot, it's really happening. And that whole thing about like more than 60% of finance function will be automated. Yes, it will. So we have to figure out how to work in that new realm. It doesn't mean our job goes away. It doesn't mean that the function goes away by any means. It just means that we'll have different tools at our disposal to do the same, to play the same role that we have. And we have to train ourselves. and get ready, train our teams.
Absolutely. So in addition to agility and flexibility, I think you're clearly highlighting adaptability, because
Yeah,
the
exactly.
ecosystem is changing at an accelerating pace. The
Yeah.
squared part of it, speed and velocity, but this is the acceleration.
Yeah.
Matt, what would be your thoughts? And then I'm going to have a quick little follow-up thing that triggered in my mind.
Sure. I'm going to give my thoughts on AI here in just a second, but I think in the near term, I think for the balance of this year, we're probably going to see the other side of that business cycle, where interest rates have risen so fast and labor markets are getting tight, and those impacts on companies' capital spend will be challenging for companies to deal with. Maybe I'm being a little selfish. My company, is what we do is our revenue is really other companies' capital spend. And so as we kind of digest through that cycle, and kind of companies maybe have overspent a little bit or are assessing midway through the year, managing through that, I would say usual business cycle choppiness will be a little bit challenging. I think Shweta hit on it, and longer term going forward is the impact of AI. And I'll say it's an opportunity and a challenge. I think it's obviously a tremendous opportunity to harness, otherworldly amounts of data and have generative AI help drive intelligence out of that AI. The challenge is kind of the old garbage in, garbage out. It goes back to data hygiene. So kind of making sure that what goes into the system is good and clean and reliable will require a lot of diligence. Otherwise, the biggest challenge that I see is becoming overly reliant on the answers spat out by an automated process that doesn't have that person in the middle providing the sense check, that sort of reasonable test, if you will, just to say, if nothing else, check the box and go, yep, that makes sense, or I don't know. I mean, that seems a little far off. So those I would see as personally as the biggest opportunities and challenges in the near to medium term.
Those are great insights. It's interesting you bring up the latter point about be careful, the sensitivity of, you need to fully understand the basis behind which the generative AI generated the outcomes. I happened to read an article today about some individuals who've been using generative AI to take a photo that they had of themselves and tried to make it a professional photo. Like, instead of spending $500, $1,000 or whatever, why can't I just use generative AI? And depending on the application they were using, it looked at you, the human being, and was doing certain things where you're like, well, wait a minute. That's changing it. That's changing me, not creating a polished presentation image and a really nice jacket or a really nice outfit. And that's outside of the realm of FP&A and finance, but take that into the world of, hey, ChatGPT or whatever application, go through the annual report and do blank, or go through our results for the year to date and do blank. To your point, garbage in, garbage out. And it's that fiduciary role that we all play to ensure that the output needs to be of the highest integrity, as we represent the financial interpretation of a lot of things.
Yeah, and I'm going to tack on one thing that I always kind of kicks around in the back of my head about maybe one of the biggest risk factors of trusting an automated process are all the one-offs. So if you think about all the pro forma work that we do to remove one-time items or include one-time items or mitigate noise, that is a function that I don't know that AI can handle that well at this point in time. And it's something that would have to be curated along the way, I think, no matter what.
Great points. Next question, and Matt, we'll start with you here. It's the evolution of these questions here. They're building upon themselves. Are you currently using any multiple modeling approaches to increase probabilities, outcomes, and scenarios?
So currently, no. I mean, my company is, I would say, a bit a combination of maybe immature in our processes. A lot of the corporate finance team is new. A lot of the companies are recently sold to Congruex. And so that's one aspect that we don't have a lot of data under our hood, if you will, to kind of mine through. The other aspect of learning about construction is that it's really hard to forecast, because we ask the same questions, like, why don't we use trending analysis or correlations or things of that nature? And I'm learning that a lot of things happen spur of the moment that provide material swings in the forecast. Examples from my past life have been where there's, when I worked in a bank, there were pretty stable trends over a 3-5 year period. So you could trend out a lot of data, and then you could break it apart into subgroups and say, well, as the mix changes, then we can accurately predict changes in margin and performance, et cetera. Correlations is another one where, again, it kind of goes to the data mining aspect of what we're doing. Sometimes I don't have to find causality. If I can find a correlation that holds true kind of all the time, I can use that to drive a pretty accurate forecast. But no, a lot of what we're doing right now at Congruex, I would say, is the formation of some of those processes that will hopefully lead us to a little bit more reliable. Maybe it is, for some of our larger customers that are publicly traded, can you go look at capital spend and look at our revenue, find that correlation, and use that to drive forward-looking views in at least a directional sense.
No, that's good input. I think I'm hearing a couple things, like teasing out some of your statements there, Matt, where as you're clearly highlighting, of course, you would love to find the perfect causality, but often you may not have the data sets that allow you to do so. So you'll look for correlations, and with the human intelligence, will assess the viability of these different proxies that you might be able to use. But in some sense, spoken like a consultant, it depends. It depends on the problem you're trying to address. It depends on the data availability, the quality of data. So we as practitioners need to, back to our toolkit, sometimes look at things in different ways and model differently.
Exactly.
Shweta, how about you on this one?
Oh, I mean, so I work with so many different types of startups. We have a variety of different tools. I mean, the big thing that we're constantly looking for is, of course, I mean, I think this is especially for volatile businesses such as tech startups in the startup or early stage world, is cash flow management. So we're constantly forecasting out cash flow. Cash is king. That's always like your go-to. Hey, do I have enough to pay my bills? Am I liquid enough? Outside of that, a lot of times it's a combination of scenario planning and stress testing, right? So we're looking at different stressors that can impact the business. What happens if we don't raise the kind of money we want, or what happens if certain customers, and a lot of times with startups, there's a heavy reliance on 1 or 2 customers. And so you have to kind of model out and stress test, hey, what happens if they, cut their spending by 10%, 20%? What does that do to your margins? How does that impact, your ability to grow at the same rate, for your ability to raise that next round? Are you going to hit those metrics? The scenario planning and doing things like, a lot of times these, with a lot of startups, you're kind of on almost like an assembly line, where you go from one round of funding to the next round of funding, and it's very it's a process that's kind of set up, and you need the right metrics in order to hit that next round, or else you'll be in trouble. So we're always doing a lot of different scenarios and modeling out, okay, well, how early do I need to have it, or how much do I need to raise? Because if I don't raise enough, maybe I can get a smaller raise done easier, I can close faster, but with that money, I'm not going to get the kind of KPIs that I need in order to raise that next round. So what do I need to do in order to get those KPIs for that next round, I need to make sure that I have sufficient funding now. So it may mean having a bigger round now than I even need, but that's because I need those in order to hit those KPIs. So it's a lot of those those three are really, I mean, it's your basics of financial modeling and forecasting, I think, scenario planning, cash flow forecasting, and stress testing. But those are the three that are always our go-to.
Absolutely. And that makes complete sense. And I think you're clearly highlighting, depending on where an organization is in their evolution, the different elements, you may need to absolutely 100% focus on cash forecasting, cash position, but there could be the ebb and flow where at different points in time, say like Matt, you're describing, hey, there might be some clouds on the economic horizon where you're the beneficiary of other people's CapEx spend, but if they're pulling back a bit and they're slowing down a bit, that obviously has pretty important implications for your organization. I'm going to turn us, because there's an interesting question that came up, and it deals with more the FP&A function, but I'd love to hear both of your insights around this. And Swetha, I'll start with you here. Question is, what recommendations can you make for organizations that are struggling to successfully strengthen the FP&A function?
Yeah.
So I'll put you both on the spot on this one.
Yeah, that's a great question. So, I mean, so FP&A, like I said, you're only as good as the information that is given to you, and your information is very reliant on your relationships. So for me, one of the big things, and I think we kind of touched on, Matt, you touched on it a little bit around that business partnership. So for me, the biggest thing is focus on your relationship with the business. I would really figure out what are the KPIs that will help the business really succeed, and not just because FP&A doesn't own your bottom line, right? But what FP&A really does is help businesses make better financial decisions. So build out KPIs or work with your businesses in ways and build those relationships so that you can help them make better financial decisions. I would also, of course, that goes into kind of aligning yourself with strategic kind of objectives that they have. And it also goes back to what I touched on earlier. The other big thing I would really do is work on shortening your cycles for forecasts and budgets. Even if maybe the budget is at corporate, you're managing a divisional thing, maybe it's just, how can you shorten it from the business side? But that's doing that. It's amazing how much more value when you close out your books really fast, and then you have your forecast done really early in the month. It's amazing how, if you can do it. So Alcoa was a company that I used to work for that used to have the 8-hour close, and really every quarter within day 5, so within 1 week, you had your rolling forecast done, your 18-month rolling forecast done within 1 week. It's wild. So 6 quarters, we had always a rolling forecast on, but what that allowed us to do is in a 13-week quarter, we had 12 weeks to really apply everything that we're learning from the prior quarter. We had 12 weeks to apply all of those learnings. We had 12 weeks to learn what was happening with the business. So it really, shortening that is not just about like shortening the pain. It just gives you as a finance function, as an FP&A function, more time to go back to the business and say, hey, this is really what's happening with your data. Here's what I'm seeing, and here's how we can make it better. And then react to new data that is coming in, because you're done looking back now. You're now helping them look ahead, and you can go back to that scenario modeling, all of those things. So to me, it's relationship building, helping be much more aware and aligned with the business's strategic objectives, and as well as making sure that we are, from our own process, making that process as short and painless as possible, not just for cost efficiency or anything. It's because we want to be more value add. That'll always be my little thing that I'm going to
Beating the drum.
Yeah.
The mantra. No, that's great. Those are such important foundational principles. Matt, what would you say around for organizations that are struggling to successfully strengthen FP&A?
I would say the fastest way to help that process along, to Shweta's spot on about the business partnership aspect, is force your divisional leaders or department heads to speak to their numbers, and then reinforce they have an FP&A partner to rely on. So set the meetings, hold the department heads accountable for speaking to the numbers, and then give them the resource. And again, you set the target, you provide them the tools, and then you let this FP&A individual kind of provide the value. That, in my view, helps build the relationship. And it only takes 1 or 2 difficult financial reviews for department heads to start relying more and more on FP&A, at least in my experience. And really, again, drives back the value add function that FP&A provides. So, it's kind of like, just set a date, hold people accountable, and then give them the tool to make them successful, which is us. And I think you'll be surprised how fast you will develop a strong FP&A team, because it will also push, because the leaders will, people having to speak to their numbers will also, they're smart individuals. They'll start pressing the FP&A individual with good, hard questions to go solve, problems to solve. And the whole thing becomes kind of a virtuous cycle, in my experience, of strengthening not just FP&A, but everybody. Because the more you spread financial acumen across the company, the better the whole company performs, in my opinion.
Yeah, and just to add on that, you're absolutely right. The power of standardized reporting and standardized KPIs and dashboard is really, really, people kind of don't realize how key it can be, but that's another huge thing, to have everything standardized. I know every business, every division will claim that they are so unique, and they are. They're very unique. They're unique flowers. We get it. But having standardized reports really helps everybody understand and get used to seeing numbers, and get used to being held accountable to. Having dashboards, have the same dashboards across all your divisions, across all your managers, across whatever locations, factories, however you break out your organization. That also is so powerful. To your point, Matt, like, it helps you hold people accountable.
That's really important. Matt and Shweta, this triggered a comment that came up in a prior panel discussion today, where we're talking about FP&A, and one of the gentlemen speaking said, well, Philip, FP&A is kind of like a personal relationship. You have to nurture it, you have to make it grow, you have to give it the care and feeding, and it's a two-way street. So he said, what we do is we have date night, like a figurative way of interacting with the business partners, learn about their side of the world, infuse the discussions with FP&A has their own set of expectations and needs, but it's the back and forth with that relationship. And I think that's exactly what you were describing, Matt. That's kind of the essence of how you get that partnering elevated to that next best level. So let's go on. Another question here, and I'm going to jump for both of you to question 6. Matt, I'll start with you. How can finance teams remain agile, adjust plans quickly, and improve forecast accuracy during times of disruption?
Sure, that's a great question. I think first, and I'm going to check my notes I wrote, no babies, can't have any babies. And what I mean by that is, you can't have any process or function that you hold so dear to your heart that you can't bear to see it change or evolve in any way. I've had that in my past where I had a baby and I didn't like giving it up, but you have to kind of be willing to let things change and evolve and improve in that way. Keep an open mind as you're looking at data. I would say from a process standpoint, learn to fail quickly. Get used to failing and failing quickly so you can move on through the disruption and through some of the speed and acceleration of some of the changes. But I would say Shweta said it earlier in this meeting, where you have to establish a very strong fundamental set of processes of how you approach the work. Work will change and fluctuate and it'll be disruptive, but if your process and your approach is standardized and rigorous, you can manage through all of that change a lot better and a lot more smoothly, with a lot less, I'd say, agita, not just for the organization, but for your own FP&A team. So when you kind of set a very high bar and a very strong standard across how you approach the problems, no matter what they are, you can manage through those problems more effectively and more efficiently.
Great insights. And you're also speaking to the elements of those well-defined processes, well-documented processes, executed processes with enabling tools and technology and all the data considerations that effectively gives you a certain element of resiliency. So that disruption hits you, you're better equipped to say, we have to adapt on the fly. Let's go back to the core elements that we have in place, make the configuration changes, whatever it is, such that you can accommodate that disruption.
Yeah.
Shweta, what about, how would you respond to that?
Yeah, I mean, I think scenario-based forecasting, driver-based forecasting, budgeting, those are great tools to help FP&A really build that agility into their process. And this also goes into having rolling forecasts. That's another rolling budgets, rolling forecasts. These are all tools that are really very effective in helping FP&A become much more agile and really drive that decision making. We're a decision support function at the end of the day. So it's all about how do you help them make decisions, and it's about being reactive. But to both what you guys both brought up, you can't be reactive until you have that process built in and you have the relationships in mind. But my go-tos are always driver-based, scenario-based, rolling, and shortened forecasts. Like, these are kind of the key ones that I use in order to really help build that foundational FP&A. To your point, Matt, it's that FP&A approach, right? It's not even about the thing. It's just, how do I approach it? I'm not just asking you for the number. I'm asking you for what drives that number. I'm asking you for things that could change in that number that will have downstream impact, so that I can build all of those variables into my model. And I'm constantly modeling, but for all my businesses. But part of that modeling, for me to do that effectively, is knowing all of these things.
Yeah, that's your FP&A playbook. The secret
Exactly.
The secret sauce to make it work. We're almost up in here on time, but I think there's one question that I think the audience would love to hear perspectives from both of you here.
Mm-hmm.
Is there any fear from employees of automation replacing their jobs? We've talked about AI, we've talked about predictive analytics, we've talked about what's coming. And Shweta, maybe I'll start with you and then let Matt, quickly opine on this one.
Yeah, I think there is a fire or fear or apprehension of some sort, but I think at the end of the day, to me, AI or any of these are tools to help you do your job better. So, hey, if there's a tool that comes out that will make modeling easier for me, just like how back in the day, Excel made it easier for you to have tables, or whatever, pivot tables. You used to have to do analysis before pivot tables, which blows my mind, using arrays and crazy stuff. So to me, it's just AI is more likely to be there to help me do my job better. So I'm really excited about it. But there is a lot of fear and apprehension that, oh, well, they won't need us for modeling. Well, they don't need us for modeling now. What they need us for is decision support, not modeling. And what they need us for is to provide that color and to provide that rigor and discipline around forecasts and budgets and analysis. And that's still there regardless of AI.
Yeah, great perspective. Matt, do you want to quickly chime in on that one?
Yeah, I think Shweta nailed it. I would say maybe a little tongue in cheek. If you're afraid that AI will take your job, I don't know that you're doing the right job. I think that the value we bring goes beyond AI. Shweta, again, nailed it when she said it's the business intelligence, making sense of the data that's out. You can use AI to do your modeling right now, but understanding it, building the relationship, helping drive decisions, being the strategic partner is where we fill a large role across a company. And so if, to quote an old coworker of mine from many years ago, he asked a great question. What do you bring to the table? It's like, well, I don't just bring modeling to the table. And neither does anybody listening to this on this call. And so it's the AI should be a tool to help you do the thing that you really do well, which is provide value to the organization through strategic partnerships and business intelligence better.
Very well stated. I think it's a perfect wrapper on the session. So we've reached the end here. First of all, thank you both. I'll speak for myself. I immensely enjoyed this, and I love hearing from leaders like yourselves, and hopefully all the participants did as well. Fantastic session. There's some gems and takeaways I know that everyone will greatly appreciate, and hopefully go back to their organizations to move on and continue their own FP&A transformation journeys. Nick, with that, I'm going to hand the baton back to yourself.
Well, thank you all for such an insightful panel discussion. That was great. And I want to thank everyone else for joining us today. This session, along with all of today's content, will be available on demand following the event. This officially concludes the Argyle CFO Leadership Forum. Thank you again for joining us today and engaging in our content. Have a great rest of your day.